Hello, everybody. My name is Alesh Eisner, and welcome to the Canadian Money Talk. Today is a special edition. I have my friend Rob from the Mindfull Investor YouTube channel, and we wanted to do a podcast about dividend investing. So, welcome everybody, and let me introduce Rob once again.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to this podcast, Alesh. Let's get started. Yeah. Oh, and I have a question right here. You did mention Bell, and right now I see the payout ratio is at 131%. What you mentioned about expenses and depreciation makes sense, but would you compare that to the industry standard? Because I look at that tab and that's 86% for the competition. So I'm guessing it's the Telus, it's the Shaw, the Rogers around the same sector. So how would we justify this discrepancy between 131 to 86?
Yeah, I mean, you do want to look at the sector overall average, if you can look that up or calculate it yourself. And you do want to look at, so in case of Bell, yeah, looking at TELUS and, Shaw Rogers, if they do get together. So that's definitely a comparison. I don't think that would be a red flag, like a deal breaker for me. It would be something to consider along with other factors before I purchase the stock. But to be honest, I bought Bell a couple of days ago and I looked at the free cash flow uh, that they had, and I'm like, yeah, they can cover their dividend. They've been covering it for ages. They're growing their dividend. So I didn't really have worries from that perspective. Uh, I have other worries about Bell, which I'm going to keep an eye out on, such as, are they actually making money from the media that they're producing, or should they
Uh,
be concentrating on 5G and the hardware? But that's a different story for another podcast. So yeah, I mean, I do that, and I do target the dividends that are increasing their yields. 6 to 10% seems to be standard. So those dividend aristocrats that you mentioned, and so a company that's managed to increase their dividend for the last 20 years, fingers crossed, isn't going to cut it as soon as I buy it. Stranger things have happened, but it gives you a little bit of a security. And like Canadian banks, for example, haven't cut their dividends for 100 years. So, imagine being the CEO under whose guidance the banks had to, or their bank had to cut the dividends. So, I have a good, secure feeling about those.
I think
So,
I think yeah, this really shows the importance of like diversification, not only between companies but between sectors. Because if a sector like the banking gets hit like 2008, then if you're stock picking, if your whole dividend portfolio only has like five stocks and three of them are banks, then then you wouldn't know what to do. Like you're so concentrated in that sector that you kind of tied to like ride with them. But if you're more diversified and that only represents maybe 5%, as you said, of your portfolio, then you can just cut it like without a thought. You just cut it. Always switch it to energy or telecommunications. But if we're so concentrated, like that, we kind of stuck.
right. Yeah, that's true. I I mean, in Canada, we have a bit of a difficulty diversifying because we basically have financials, which would be, the six banks plus Manulife, Sun Life, Great West Life. We've got the insurance companies. No, not much technology to speak of. I mean, uh, and then we have the commodities, oil and energy, and a few other companies. So we're sort of forced as Canadians to go abroad or at least into the US. And, it becomes more interesting then. So I was curious whether you had any kind of suggestions for taxation purposes, because there's definite differences between dividends from Canadian companies versus what's coming from the US. What's your strategy?
Um, yeah, I think I got the idea from you actually. Like how you how you save like 15% withholding tax. I kind of know that, but then in my back of my mind, but I never paid attention to it. It's like, why am I paying extra 15%? And Canadians come like before I started this portfolio, I never bought Canadian stocks. I'm like, why am I playing with this tiny market when the US is like 10x that is, and the selection is so much broader, and the track history is, it could be much longer as well. Like, why am I stuck in this tiny market? But it's mainly for the tax advantages that you look at. That's like why we put it in, let's say, the US stocks in the RSP account to save taxes that way. I never thought of that. I actually just focused on growth before, but once I started focusing on dividends and how to max the payouts and how to save as much as possible, there are certain strategies which you're gonna mention right now.
I can.
Yeah.
They say don't let, let me make sure I get this right. Don't let the tax tail wag the investment dog. Don't let the tax tail wag the investment dog, meaning don't make investments according to the taxes. Because if you make bad investments that are tax friendly, you're still not going to do very well. Uh, every single expert and financial advisor in Canada says you need to go outside of Canada, you need to go hit emerging markets, you need to go into the US. And the problem is the tax table has made it so that we Canadians are encouraged to stay local. But so, yeah, it mainly affects dividends. For capital gains, it's the same whether you're in Canada or anywhere else. But you can get eligible Canadian dividends from companies that are public in Canada, trade on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and headquartered in Canada. Um, these eligible companies, there's no list anywhere. The CRA website says you need to go look at each of the company's websites and they will tell you whether they're eligible or not, because we told them, but they don't seem to publish a list, at least not that I found. And so those eligible dividends are taxed next to nothing. Like unless you're making huge amounts of money, um, there's pretty much no taxes on those eligible dividends. So I like those. Um, I don't have any RSP room because I'm incorporated, so I haven't been building up my RSPs. So my non-registered accounts are full of these Canadian companies that pay dividends, and I just hold them and sell them, so I don't sell them, so I don't pay any capital gains. Now, where it gets tricky is if you have a US company. So US dividends will get a 15% tax withholding. In a non-registered account, you can get that back. You can get a credit for it when you do your taxes. So they'll withhold it initially, and then you can get a credit for it when you do your taxes. If you have that US dividend payer in your TFSA, they'll charge you the 15% and you cannot get it back. But in your RRSP, they will not charge the 15%. So most people end up holding their US dividend payers in the RRSP because in a non-registered account, those US dividends would be taxed as salary, and anything coming out of an RRSP is also taxed as salary. So it makes no difference. So if you have RRSP room, that's where most people tend to put them. Because I have no RSP room, what I'm doing is when I'm buying US stocks, I tend to buy stuff like Google and Tencent, Baidu, Alibaba, not because they're Chinese companies or most of them, but because they don't pay any dividends. So that way I just have the capital gains, which are taxed the same. I also like Microsoft, which pays a 1% yield. So I'm like, okay, I'll bite the bullet and I'll pay the higher taxes on that. But so that's sort of been my goal. Having said that, I've also bought other U.S. stocks which pay more dividends, and I'm like, all right, I'll pay the taxes because I like the stock. So it's
It's only taxes on the dividends payout, right?
that's right. Only the
So if you get $100 dividends and you get 85 instead.
right. So you would
Okay.
get you'd get $85, and then you'd pay as if it were salary on the 85.
Okay.
Then when you do your taxes for the non-registered account, you get some sort of a credit. That part I'm a little fuzzy on. I leave that to my accountant, but I understand you do get the 15% back.
Yeah.
Uh, you, you never want to hold U.S. dividend payers in a TFSA because that 15% is gone. My personal thinking is because the TFSA came out after the tax treaty between the U.S. and Canada, and so it wasn't included. And so that's why they ding you and they don't recognize it. They do recognize the RSP because I that was around at the time of the tax treaty. This is just my personal thing. I never really delved into it any further. It is what it is, and we have to play by those rules. But when people are told, oh, you need to invest abroad, it's the taxes that are making us invest locally. You know, so I've built up enough of a portfolio that I get like 45,000 a year in dividends, and so the taxes play a role at that point. So I try to make them, as tax efficient as possible. So
Okay. So you just mentioned 45K a year. So I'm guessing if your dividend stocks pay out like 4%, that's like 1.2-ish portfolio.
yeah, I mean my whole investable portfolio is around 3 mil, but a lot of it is in growth stocks, and
Okay.
I do also reinvest uh, in a drip. So for my whole portfolio, it's about 70,000 that I get back in dividends, but 25, 30,000 gets reinvested because it's coming from the mutual funds, and the mutual funds I'm not touching. And
Oh,
I'm just trying to live off of my corporate stocks, which are that 1.2 mil that pays that 45. So um, I think I've sort of bragged previously about being able to live off of about 30,000. And each year I'm investing into a TFSA and in more into mutual funds. So that 45 sort of covers that, and um, you know,
so this 1.2 is mainly Canadian dividend paying stocks.
it is,
Okay.
it is.
And do you still every year do you still contribute to it, or is there like a target you want to hit for that portfolio?
No, not. I don't have a specific target. I mean, we could talk about the 4% rule, which like I've long surpassed, uh, because I can live off of a low number. But if I'm working, pretty much my entire contract money goes into investments because I'm able to live off of just the dividends that I have coming in. If I'm not working, yeah, then I'm pretty much just surviving off the dividends, and if something good happens, then I'll buy more of something. But generally, I'm not investing much beyond. So my monthly investments, which are automated, I do 1,000 into Mauer mutual funds in the corporation, and then I do 3 index funds, $460 every month into the TFSA, and so that 1,500 is automatic. So I do that no matter what. So I do need to come up with the cash for that.
And just let me run some numbers here. So 460 times 12. Okay, so how you came up with 460 is just because you're dividing 5,500 into 12,
That's
like for
that's
your
right.
TFSA per year.
That's
Okay,
right.
was it 6,000 this year or 55?
Oh yeah, yeah. I just couldn't be bothered to fill out the paperwork to bump it up to the $500. Yeah, yeah. That's the old number. I'm just like, yeah, I'm fine with it. And I count the years, and then I'll throw in more money when I've accumulated enough room, because you definitely don't want to go over.
I
So
was wondering where you can check this number. I remember seeing it under the CRA website that
yeah.
says, "Oh, you can contribute up to whatever amount." But does that backtrack to like before or just this year? Like how much empty space you have from before?
So I think it's in the Services Canada website. It's in the government of Canada. That number is terrible. They do have a number for you. That number is brutal, brutally
Oh,
out of date. So you can't do anything by it. You basically have to track your own stuff as far as how much you're investing, because like I don't think they get any updates. Like I know I'm investing into it, and then I look and the number is just what they had for me a year ago, and then they just added 6,000 to it, and I'm like, so that can't be right, because I know I've been investing into it. So apparently there's some lack of interface between Q-Trade and the government of Canada. Uh,
yeah. I think I
kind of
was
a
penalized for that.
yeah.
For also over contribution to my TFSA, I put in like now 6 grand more because I forgot if I put it in last year or not. I double contributed. I think they penalized me for I don't know like 10% or and then they charge interest on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You have to call them and say, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm going to put the money back right away. Uh, so apparently somebody somewhere has the right number, but they don't seem to want to share it.
No, but they know if you over contributed like right away.
Apparently, right?
But if under, they don't care about you. Like, well, whatever.
But why don't they put it up on a website somewhere where I can know that this is my limit? Because apparently they know what your limit is
Yeah,
at any time.
it's tricky. It's
It's
tricky.
very tricky. So I'd rather under contribute and not have to fill out the paperwork that I mentioned, and be safe, because yeah, they give you stiff penalties. Yeah, and you have to put the money back right away. So but you reminded me sort of an interesting story. I worked at Coast Capital Savings many years back, like 15 years ago, and I was talking to somebody in the investment department or group, and she said that at the time nobody was cross-checking the RRSP slips that your broker sends you, or that your financial advisor sends you, that says you can put this along with your taxes that you paid these RSPs. Basically, if you made up a reasonable facsimile of an RSP slip without actually investing any money, you could write that off, and nobody was cross-checking things. Now that has since changed, but just the fact that that kind of thing goes on without any checking is is amazing. That they send you slips and everybody dutifully attaches them, but you could have, in print shop or something back then, you could have made your own and gotten a tax credit for it, and nobody would have known. Amazing stuff. I mean, it's much better to actually invest the money and have it grow, but that aside, just for the tax credit. So and apparently they're still doing that now with the TFSA, because nobody knows what the limit is, uh, or at least they don't share it with you. So yeah, but so I don't really have a target. I mean, I've sort of reached the target myself. My portfolio is going to keep growing. When I have money, I'm going to invest into it. Uh, I have real estate properties in the U.S., which I'm going to be selling one per year. So whenever the money comes in, I'm going to keep investing into the same kinds of dividends. Um, but yeah, I don't really have a target. All I wanted was to not have to work. And if you just have money sitting in your savings account, you run through it fairly quickly if you're not working. But if you invest it and you have enough of it, then you don't have to work for the rest of your life, which was sort of my goal. But so, same question back to you. What was the goal when you started a dividend investing?
I like round numbers. So
Okay.
so so with the 1 mil target for dividend stocks, I for purely Canadian dividend paying stocks is probably my end goal. Anything on top, any payouts, I'll probably take out and put in my growth, my option plays. I'll just cap it at a mil because I still believe in like other markets like Hong Kong, which you had like Tencent and Alibaba's of China. Like Canadian stocks is not really for growth. Back in the day, like I think it was like 20 years ago, they had BlackBerry, which which went like 10x in like 3 years. That was a highlight for Canadians for me. Like nothing else really compared to that in during that era. I mean, right now there are some wheat stocks, but I didn't touch really touch those. But yeah, 1 mil for the Canadian dividends portfolio, and I think what you mentioned about like qualified versus non-qualified dividends, and I think like there was a cap
Eligible.
eligible, yes. Yeah, so I think there was a cap for like $40,000 of eligible dividends that you can collect tax free, absolutely tax free, and then anything on top is like you have to get taxed at maybe 15-20% or at your tax bracket.
Uh, yes, yeah. So I know most people don't spend their evenings looking at the Canadian tax table. I think it's you want to do it in the morning. If you do, don't do it in the evening while you're still fresh and full of coffee. But like to me, especially if you're going to set something up and run it for years, you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Some people don't know the difference between an RSP and a TFSA, and they might be doing the wrong thing for years. And so you want to educate yourself and know what will work for you. And so you have one column, the most heavily taxed, which is for interest, wages, and salaries. The next column is for capital gains, which currently is 50% of the column to the left. Whether that gets increased is a political question right now. And then you have the two dividend columns. One is for eligible dividends, and then the last one is for non-eligible. The eligible dividends, you're right. If you have no other income, you can make about 50,000 in Canadian eligible dividends with zero taxes. So if you have that million, 2 million, 3, you're getting 4% dividend yield. You're putting 50 grand in your pocket tax free if you have no other income. Now, if you have other income, you add the dividends plus, let's say, the salary together. You see what tax bracket you're in, and you pay on the appropriate amount in the appropriate column. So if you're making salary, then your dividends are going to get taxed somewhat, but it's still going to be the best out of all of the columns. So the tax table is encouraging investors, which is fine. That's how it's made up, and that's the game that you got to play. If it encouraged people who work with their hands, then I guess I'd be working with my hands. I don't know. so
Yeah, yeah.
so
So
yeah.
these eligible ones, I think I tried to compile a table before,
Okay.
and I got up to like 10 to 12, and then like oh, some are just impossible to find. But I find that like the major banks are, and then some energy, insurance, and then telecommunications are. But many, I think all the REITs aren't.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's like a general rule, right?
Um, yeah, they have the dash U or the dot UN depending on where you're looking.
Yeah.
I think I want to say that they're domiciled in some tropical island. I want to say Barbados, but I'm probably
Or
wrong.
Cayman Islands or whatever.
Cayman
Yeah.
Islands, something like that.
Yeah.
and so they're considered foreign dividends. Um, there's no 15% withholding, I don't believe,
No.
but they get taxed as if they were salary or interest. I have
Yeah.
I have some investments which kick off quite a bit of money, but is also taxed as interest. Uh, Others, for some reason, pay partially in American dollars and partially in Canadian dollars. But who knows how these things are structured, frankly. I know I should since I put my money into them, but not when you have 40 of them. And sometimes it's easiest to go look on Qtrade, look at past dividends that have been paid, and there's a very handy column that says U.S. dividend or Canadian eligible dividend. I'm like, yes, more of those. Well, what was it? Oh, Great West Life. Oh, Manulife. Okay, so I sometimes use that. I'm revealing all my horrible secrets of what not to do. Do your research first, people. So why don't we call it a day? Uh, I've been Alesh Eisner, and this has been Rob from the Mindful Investor. We are going to do more of these podcasts in the near future, so look for those. And I will wish everybody a profitable day. All right.
Thank you.